The first test is called as 10% revenue test. What is 10% revenue test? Imagine there are 4 segments, and for each, like segment A, B, C, D, each segment has revenue. Segment revenue I am talking about. Segment revenue, say 300, 200, 100 and 50. Like this you have segment revenues. Now what you are supposed to do is total up all these segment revenues. So what will that come to? 650. Now on the segment revenue total, you will apply 10%. On the segment revenue total, you will apply 10%. So on 650, if you apply 10%, that comes to 65, right? Now listen carefully. If any segment, if any of those segments A, B, C, D has segment revenue of greater than or equal to 65, then you will make that as a reportable segment under this category. I am repeating. You have taken the segment wise revenues for 4 segments. You total that up, and after totaling it up, you are calculating 10% on the total, right? So in our example, total was 650, and on 650, 10% is 65. Now what you are going to check is any segment having segment revenue of greater than or equal to 65. So in our case, A, B and C have segment revenue greater than or equal to 65, right? So that way, those 3 will become reportable segments under this particular test. Now does that mean that segment D is not reportable? Don't conclude like that. It only means that segment D is not reportable under this test. It should be put to other tests, right? We have totally 6 tests, I said. So you have to check for the other tests with respect to segment D. That's all. That's what you're supposed to do. Great. Now let's come to the next test. This is called as 10% result test. So what is this 10% result test? Now, say there are some 6 segments. Listen carefully to what I'm saying. There are some 6 segments. Segment A, B, C have segment results. Result means segment revenue minus segment expense, right? So segment result for segment A, B, C are 100, 200, 300. Okay. Come to segment D, E, F, you have minus 100, minus 200, minus 400. Okay. So here 100, 200, 300, and with respect to segment D, E, F, you have minus 100, minus 200, minus 400. So the first step what you should do under result test is divide all the segment results into what are the segments which are giving positive result, what are the segments which are giving negative result. First you have to compartmentalize this, you have to divide these. Great. Now after dividing, you have to take the total. Take total of positives separately, total of negatives separately. Right. So total of positives is how much? 600. Total of negatives is 700. Okay. Now you should not total up both these things and say 600 minus 700 total minus 100. Wrong. You shouldn't do that. Positives separately we totaled, negatives separately we totaled. Positives total is 600, negatives total is 700. Now what we should do is, ignoring the sign, ignoring whether it is plus or minus, we would just say modulus. Modulus, in your school you would have learned this, I am sure, right? When you apply modulus, that sign will go, everything will become positive number, right? Everything will become a positive absolute number when you apply modulus, right? So you can now say this is 600, this is 700, okay? Which is greater of the two? 700 is greater of the two. So choose 700. So once again, think of what we have done. Separate positives and negatives, total positives and negatives, and apply modulus, means basically take absolute values without saying that is minus and this is plus. And if this is 600 and this is 700, take the greater of the two, that is 700. Now this 700, on this 700 apply 10%. 10% of 700 will be 70, right? Now friends, what we are supposed to do is check whether any of the segments has segment result of greater than or equal to 70. Segment result of greater than or equal to 70. Now, there are some segments which have negative results. Still, don't try to compare it as what this is minus 100, this is plus 70. No, don't compare like that. Even if you say it is minus 100, just compare like this. This is 70, that is 100. That is how you are going to compare. Okay. So, in that sense, every segment result what you have here is greater than or equal to 70. So, all the 6 segments become reportable segments under this particular example. Now, just imagine if there was one segment where the segment result was some 50, then what would have happened? That particular segment would not have become reportable under this test. You should have tested it for other categories. Friends, now let's come to the third test. We call it as 10% of segment assets test. So what we are supposed to do here is take for each of the segments the segment assets. Okay. Now let us say the segment assets are like this: 500 segment A, B, C, D. A 500 segment assets, then B 300, C 150 and D 50. Like this you have 4 segments. Total of all the segment assets is 1000. Okay, right. Now, what you are supposed to do is apply 10% of this 1000. 10% of 1000 comes to 100. Okay. Now you should check, is the segment asset for segment A greater than or equal to 100? Yes. So, segment A becomes reportable. Then similarly check for B. Are the segment assets of B greater than or equal to 100? Yes. So, B becomes reportable. C also becomes reportable, but D is not greater than or equal to 100. So, D will not become reportable. Now, just imagine, instead of D being 50, if C were 100 and D were also 100, in such a case, if it is exactly equal to 100, will it become reportable? Yes, it will become reportable, because in all the 3 tests what we have done till now, it is greater than or equal to 10%. So, in every step you are checking, even if it is equal, it becomes reportable. If it is less than that, only then it doesn't become reportable.